Hi there, my name's Keith. Many of you have visited the site before to see my blogs, and I thank you for joining me once again. Today we're going to do things a little different. We're not going to be talking about a movie, we're not going to be talking about a TV show. Today we're going to fight. To my right is my friend Sarah. Sarah is one of four people's opinions that I greatly respect when it comes to UFC. However, over the past few months, Sarah and I have greatly disagreed on one subject, and that subject is that of Chael P. Sonnen. Today we are going to debate because I believe in my heart of hearts that Chael Sonnen is currently the most important fighter in the UFC. Sarah completely disagrees with that. So first of all, I'd like to thank Sarah for joining me today.
Thanks, Keith!
So, again, I've known Sarah for a little over a year now. I can tell you that she's a wonderful person. She's a great human being. She's very sweet. There's not really a lot of things that I can say that I don't like about Sarah, but on this point, I think that you're completely wrong.
Well, I guess we're about to find out.
So, it's pretty informal. I guess what we'll do is we're going to start, I guess, since I'm bringing the point forward, I'll express why I think Chael Sonnen is important. I'll give you a brief synopsis, and then we can go at it. Sound good?
Sounds fabulous, Keith.
Okay. So for those of you not in the know, UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, started many years ago. And it was pretty much a disorganized organization until Dana White and the Fertitta brothers came along and gave it some structure. Over the past years, we've seen it grow exponentially with fighters like George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva becoming household names. But at the end of the day, while a lot of people are going to watch these fights and they want to see a good knockout or a good takedown or a good submission, at the end of the day, it is still a business. Now, Dana White would be lying if he said he didn't take some of his pay-per-view knowledge from Vince McMahon, who's run the WWE for years and years and years. Vince McMahon created pay-per-view and made pay-per-view what it is. He took a model that Don King pretty much introduced, and he perfected it. And now Dana White's running with it too, kind of a passing of the torch, if you will. But the interesting thing is that when you look at the model of UFC and WWE, absolutely UFC is completely real, while WWE, as we all know, is scripted. But the interesting thing is, you'll have fighters like George St. Pierre, who are very well respected but not just by my opinion, but by so many opinions, because he's a very classy guy, he's very respectful of his opponents, and he's great in the ring. But then along comes a guy like Chael Sonnen. And Chael Sonnen, for me, is very, very intriguing. Now, Sarah will tell you that she pretty much watches everything UFC-oriented. She watches all the fights, she watches The Ultimate Fighter, whereas myself, I don't watch as many UFC fights as Sarah would. When I'm looking at my entertainment dollar, as many of you know, I go to a lot of movies, I'll go to I'll go to a lot of sporting events, and I'll dabble in some UFC pay-per-views. The typical UFC pay-per-view runs about $60, $70, so I'm not ordering every single one every month. I'll occasionally go with some friends to the bar. But when Chael Sonnen hit the scene, and especially over the last few years, I've been very intrigued with him, and for me it's been, what would Chael do next? So from a customer point of view, for me to go and invest my money to see what Chael would do next is one of the reasons, not the only and not the main, but one of the reasons why I think Chael is the most important fighter. And I hear myself talking a lot, so I'm going to let you say.
No, actually, you were already starting to prove my point, Keith, so I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So there's no denying that Chael Sonnen definitely takes after the Vince McMahon book of how to be a WWE entertainment person. Without a doubt. However, you also touched base on a really good point too. UFC is a business. It's in there for making money. So what's important? Filling up the seats. So I actually took the time to do some research. And what I actually did is I went and looked to see what were the top 10 grossing UFC fights. So I checked it out. Guess what? Not a single one of them involved Chael Sonnen. We're also going to take a look at, and I'm sure as we'll go through along those sizes, we're also going to take a look at, so you're talking about Chael Sonnen in the past couple of years. Well, oddly enough, I went through the past couple of years, and I actually went through each pound-for-pound list of top 10 best fighters, most important to the actual MMA in general. And I'm even looking at sites that are including, Bellator and other organizations as well, so not just looking at UFC. Oddly enough, not a single one had Chael Sonnen. Oddly enough, too, if we're even talking about the right nows, if you go to the ultimatefighter.com website, there's actually a section down there on the bottom that has the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. The top 10 fighters who have stopped whose averages of fights are the shortest, who has the most lethal shots landed, you know, most submission attempts, there's a whole bunch of them. Guess what? Not a single one of them have Chael Sonnen's name on them. So I definitely hear Keith's point about the fact that, you know, Chael Sonnen has a mouth, for sure. But you know what? That's what the WWE is for. I think that there's definitely good, healthy competition, but it's so easy and quick to go onto the internet, quickly look up stuff about this guy that is just, what a douchebag. And for a business like the UFC, you want people like, man, like look at UFC 1 and 2. When a man actually had to go and do tournament styles, fight 3 to 4 times in a night just to make it to the finals, like Royce Gracie, UFC 1 and 2, perfect example of what a man was really to fight. Chael Sonnen had to take drugs just to go for one fight against one guy. Yeah, sounds like he thinks he's pretty important himself. Maybe he also thought that he was pretty important when he got pleaded to and got convicted of fraud, a federal offense. Oh, for what? Money laundering. So that's a great persona that he can do when he suits up for his next fight in the WWE, where he belongs, and I think he would thrive beautifully there, not in the UFC, where it is a business of good fighters, good fights, bringing in the money, and shaboomafoo. Now back to you.
Shaboomafoo?
Shaboomafoo.
Can you say TM after shaboomafoo? Because I don't want anybody else to steal that.
Shaboomafoo, TM, copyright. Me.
All right, thank you. So again, I appreciate your comments, but you touched on a couple of things. You touched on the steroid use, and apparently from, I mean, I'm not defending it, but from what I understand about it, he was taking something that he had prescriptions for, but he wasn't exactly clear on that when he went to the medical board. And then in terms of the fraud as well, again, I'm not disputing any of those things, okay?
Yeah.
I want to address them because you mentioned them. But
totally. I'm just all putting up to why,
yeah.
If he thought he was so important,
yeah.
why would he be doing these types of things,
no,
right?
No,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, I think...
Now, here's the thing.
yeah.
In regards to your pound for pound, you know what? Okay, the pound for pound is an interesting thing that we can get into later, but that speaks to best fighter. I'm talking about most important fighters. So let me say this.
Sorry, say your point, then I will rebuttal.
Yeah. So you know, let me touch on this. If you look at the top people in the UFC, so if you were to think of, if I was to say to you, who are the top people in the UFC right now, just off the top of your head, go. Whose names would you give me?
See, that's difficult though. Like I don't think it would be smart of me to just ramble off 10 people without really thinking about it. I think there's definitely some people that deserve to be on that list.
Yeah.
So obviously the GSPs of the world and the Anderson Silvas of the world. I also think Jose Aldo's up there for sure.
Yeah.
I also think Ben Henderson has definitely earned his way into that top 10.
Okay.
But I mean, you've got to look at a multiplicity of things. Like I get your point about the fact that I'm not saying that the best fighter, I'm saying that is important.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about Chael Sonnen being important to the UFC. The best fighters in the world are important to the UFC so that they can fill the butts in the seats like the Bell Stadium or like in Toronto.
Totally
That's
agree.
money making. And I believe Chael Sonnen wasn't on either of those cards.
Okay, so let's touch. Let me address a couple of your things. First of all, when we talk about top fighters, I would think the champions. I would think John Jones.
Yeah.
I would think Anderson Silva, and I would think George St. Pierre.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that those three fighters have in common, if you were to look at their last 5 fights, all three of them, Jones, Silva, and St. Pierre, are 5-0 in their last 5 fights.
Yeah.
Would it surprise you to know that Chael Sonnen is 3-2 in his last 5 fights?
No, I think that's right. Yeah, because they put him up against wuss pusses so he could get the win. I mean,
but
tell me the people that he won against.
But the thing of it is, though, is that I will be the first person to agree with you. Do I think Chael Sonnen is a great fighter? Absolutely not. I think he's a good fighter. But again, it's his mouth. I will correct you.
But is that your only point?
No, it's not my only point. It's not my only point. The other point that I wanted to make, though, was you were saying something that was actually incorrect. You were saying if you were looking at the top UFC pay-per-views of all time and he's not on the list.
Yeah.
That is not true. If you look at the top UFC...
He did not headline a single one. He did
not
headline a single one. I will bring it up right now.
I will bring it up as well. So if you look in the last few years, not of all time, but in the last few years, last year's biggest pay-per-view was UFC 148 that had 1 million buys. John Jones has never had a pay-per-view that has had 1 million buys.
I'm not talking pay-per-views. I'm talking top grossing
Okay, and that's
UFCs.
fair. I'm talking pay-per-view buys. Because what Dana White and the Fertitta brothers are worried about are pay-per-view buys. They want to sell the pay-per-views.
You want top grossing.
Obviously,
butts in the seats.
Obviously, you want people in the seats, and I get that.
Yeah.
But you also absolutely want people at home saying, you know what, I need to tune into pay-per-view to see this.
Totally.
So if you look at the pay-per-view, because I'll be honest with you, I don't, in terms of top grossing, I don't know the numbers, but in terms of pay-per-view buy rates over the last few years, the top pay-per-view that UFC has had, 1 million buys, Chael Sonnen. Put it in perspective, Ronda Rousey just had an awesome fight a few weeks ago. Her pay-per-view buy rate was only 300,000.
That's because everyone's like, okay, well, why? Let me save the $55 armbar win.
You know, fair enough.
So I'm talking top grossing. So I don't. Okay, go ahead.
No, you go. Okay, high five.
It's your show.
Okay, no, you're my guest. You go.
So I get what you're saying, right? So pay-per-view, totally important. Smack talk, totally important to a certain degree, but it is a sport. And like, I actually started kickboxing because I like the technique, the strategy, and everything behind it. All Chael Sonnen seems to have is the smack talk. And you know what? Then go to the WWE. Like, go have fun with that. I don't see the pertinence of how his smack talking makes him the most important person in the UFC. Looking at top grossing, so I understand the pay-per-view portion, but top grossing, like, that is the most amount of money, and he was not a headliner on a single one of them. And I will help you out. Number 10, UFC 111. Number 9, UFC 120. Number 8, UFC 101. Number 7, UFC 103. Number 6, oh, sit with me, love. You're going to love this. This is great. UFC 113.
I love the background, but how about this? If you take a look at the gate, the top gate over the last 6 pay-per-views, the top gate, would you be surprised to know that the top gate was July 7, 2012, UFC 148, Silva and Sonnen 2, $6.9 million.
Top gate, like what do you mean? Like ticket at the gate? Tickets at the gate?
To your point, butts in the seats. Now, okay, so let's be honest. That is not my only argument. I look at this aspect as well. I look at the fact that, okay, Chael Sonnen's last fight was against Anderson Silva last July, and it was a loss.
Yeah.
Now, the very next thing, and can we agree that Dana White is not a stupid man?
Oh no, well, he's not a stupid man, but I think that sometimes he makes stupid decisions.
He might, in
your opinion, make he wouldn't be as successful as he is if he was a stupid guy.
And we can agree he's extremely successful. So let's look what he did. An opportunity came up for Chael Sonnen to fight John Jones, and that fight didn't take place. John Jones didn't want that fight. Now, people can argue for or against. I mean, there's the point in terms of he was preparing for Dan Henderson, and now he had to go and fight somebody else. And there's the flip side of your fighting championship fight. I mean, to each their own. But the point is that Dana White, who we both agreed is not a stupid man, said, okay, Chael Sonnen, you're a middleweight. We're going to bring you up to light
heavyweight. I thought that was a stupid decision.
To fight for the title.
He didn't deserve it, though.
But whether or not
he was coming off a loss.
He was exactly coming off a loss.
He didn't deserve it.
When is the last time you saw a fighter coming off a loss?
People help me out with this.
When is the last time you saw a fighter?
What guy gets to fight for a title belt after a loss?
The most important fighter in the UFC, that's who.
Because bunches of votes.
Because Dana White saw that there was the potential for a huge draw by bringing in Sonnen.
It was a poor decision.
Now, was it a sensible decision in terms of did he earn his right to be there? Probably not. Because
he was probably dabbling into his Vince McMahon pants. He put his Vince McMahon pants on, so I totally
realized that this fight would sell because there was already a rift apparently between Dana White and John Jones, and Chael Sonnen was saying he wants this fight. Now let me be honest, let me be clear on something here.
Yeah.
You know what, as entertaining as I find Chael Sonnen to be, and I do find him entertaining, some of the things he says are ridiculous. Like, oh, when I tapped out to Anderson Silva, I thought it was best 4 out of 5 rounds. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Chael Sonnen has had fights before where he's tapped out.
I actually looked at some of his quotes, and some of them are the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life.
Like, what a lot of people may not know is he was in the UFC before, he was sent back, he was sent out of the UFC, he was cut, he had a couple of good fights, and then he came back. I do not agree with anything that Chael Sonnen says as it pertains to the good people of Brazil. Before I knew about Brazil and UFC, I watched soccer with my dad growing up, and I always respected the Brazilian soccer team. So, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think Chael believes the stuff that he says, but I think he knows by saying it he's creating controversy. He's very much like
he's pouring himself out.
He's very much like the Lady Gaga Madonna of UFC. He may not be the most talented, but he realized realizes that controversy sells. Because let's look at it. You got two people on a Sunday afternoon who are sitting here. I get that a lot. We have two people sitting here on a Sunday afternoon debating Chael Sonnen because the crap that comes out of his mouth sometimes is absolutely unbelievable. And you're like, can a grown man actually feel this way?
I think he's a man boy inside of.
I think he realizes that he's not the greatest fighter, but what's going to get this guy attention is the things that he says. And let's look at what's happened. He's been part of one of the top UFC pay-per-view events in recent history, UFC 148 last year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Chael Sonnen put a million buys. No, I'm saying Dana White will tell you, and he has said before that what sold UFC 148 was the last fight between them. I think it's a combination of all of the heated rivalry and the trash talk and all of that. Because usually when you see somebody like George St. Pierre, you look at his fight with Carlos Condit, they're very respectful of each other. Which is, in all honesty, the way it should be. They're very respectful of each other, they get in, they fight, and it's done. And what the UFC doesn't advertise is with each one of these Silva Sonnen, death matches where they hate each other, at the end of each of those matches, they're hugging, they get along. So it's very much for show. So am I saying that he's a great fighter? I don't think he's a great fighter. I think he understands the way to a person's wallet is by selling controversy. Dana White has picked up on that. Dana White made him a coach, as we all know, for the Ultimate Fighter this year. Record numbers in ratings for the Ultimate Fighter. Yeah, look that up. Record numbers right now in the Ultimate Fighter. And again, it's because of the controversy, and it's because we are all playing this game called What Will Chael Do Next?
So how many fights does Chael Sonnen have? How many fights has he had left? Tell me. I
don't know. I'll look up how many fights he's had in his record. His record is 27 wins, 12 losses, and 1 draw. He does not have an impressive record. But again,
no. I just so total of give me some math on that hot stuff.
Really, you're gonna make me calculate? Yeah. You tell me what's.
So you've got what? He's got well over 30 fights.
Well over 30 fights.
And so you can say that one out of those over 30 fights brought in money for the UFC. That big.
Yes. One of them, definitely.
One.
Yeah.
And that makes him the most important person in the UFC.
Right now, we're talking right now.
I just need you to hear yourself, because this is what a crazy person sounds like.
In the history, am I saying that right now Chael Sonnen is a Hall of Famer? No. Am I saying that Chael Sonnen is the best fighter in the UFC history? No. Am I even saying that he's the most important fighter in UFC history? No. I think that a very, very
Yes, you are. You're just saying
not
in
history. Not in history. I'm saying right now. Right now, March 3rd, 2013, he is. Because let's look at it right now.
Yeah.
And, I have a ton of respect for George St. Pierre. But and I think he's probably the best fighter because he actually has great fights and tougher fights than I think some of the other champions do.
Agreed.
You know? So I definitely I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Chael Sonnen is the greatest fighter.
No, and I know that you're not.
But I'm saying that right now
doesn't play into the importance factor though.
But from a business standpoint, if I'm an investor in UFC, I don't know if they have investors, but probably not. But if let's say it's a publicly shared, publicly sold company.
Yeah.
I am looking at Chael Sonnen and I'm saying this guy is going to make me some money. Because let's look at it. Take it again from my perspective. You have a guy like me who does not go out and buy every single UFC pay-per-view. But that UFC pay-per-view last year, I wanted to buy. And other people, we had people here in the house, men and women, and some of the women weren't into UFC, but they're like, hearing us talking, like, I need to see what's going to happen. Because it creates interest and it creates controversy.
No, so see, I think people that were important to the sport in that way are the Hoist Gracies of the world, are the Forrest Griffin and the Stephen Bonner of the world. That grudge match, that first one, that's what brought people to the UFC.
Everybody keeps talking about Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin bringing people in. And at that time, I'm sure they did. But as Janet Jackson said, what have you done for me lately? Forrest Griffin now is...
I'm not saying that they've done anything now. But that fight... got people to tune in. No one tuned in because Chael Sonnen.
That might have brought them in, but what Chael Sonnen is doing today is keeping them. So let me ask you this: if Chael Sonnen isn't important, let's put the UFC.
I'm not saying that he's.
If he's not that important, let's put the UFC. Okay. Let's put the buy rate for that pay-per-view aside.
Okay.
Why would Dana White go out and get this guy who's coming off of a loss to coach this reality show?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think it's a stupid decision. Now,
but why would he do it?
I didn't say that he was I said he's not a stupid man, but he makes stupid decisions.
Yes, but why would he do that?
Because he's making a stupid decision. I think he gave an opportunity to someone who does not deserve it. Now, I understand maybe it was for the WWE factor. Hold on, I listen to you when you talk, mister.
Okay.
Lost my point.
Okay.
But what was I saying before I yelled at you?
you were talking about the UFC, the WWE factor.
Oh yeah. So I do agree that the WWE handbook helps sell, and I bet you that's probably what he was thinking.
Yeah.
I absolutely will not deny that. That's probably what he was thinking. He's like, you know what, this fight card's gone to poop, and I've got to try and find a way to save it. So you know what? Screw the actual talent or the sport of it or the actual good people fighting. I'm gonna pull in my little hoard out character who will come in, whore out his little mouth, and then I'll be able to make money off it. Totally agree that that's what happened, but I think it was it wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I get that. You know what? It definitely looks impressive on your resume when you're coming off a loss to get a title fight, but I thought that was like the biggest kick in the balls. Dan Henderson even said, you know what, I should stop training, I should go into the school of smack talk, because that seems to be what's important now. And that's what peeves me off, because then now what we're doing is we're drowning the actual sport. You want a WWE, then go to WWE. I want a league that's actually going to be about the fighting, the technique, the actual, really good matchups. That's what it should be about. It shouldn't be about because Chael said, oh my god, he called one of the ring girls fat. Oh, he did one of these things and da-da-da-da. That's just, to me, that's dumb.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, one of the best fights that I've seen in a while was probably, was it the Shogun Hua? Am I saying that right? Against Dan Henderson.
Yeah.
Which again are two guys who probably you don't talk about on a daily basis.
It's true.
Which I thought put on an absolutely phenomenal fight.
And I'm not a big Dan Henderson fan, at all, but I had to give him credit that fight was okay.
Because I look at a lot of these fights, and I used to come down on George St. Pierre and say, oh, his fights are boring because I always go to decision. But then I kind of looked at it and I'm like, here's a guy who's going 25 minutes, what amazing cardio. When I look at his opponents, and he's, the Jake Shields and the Condits, that the guys that he's fighting are legitimate top contenders.
Yeah.
And you look at the people that Anderson Silva is fighting, and one thing I do agree that Chael Sonnen said is that he's like, when have you seen him fight? Because his schedule, the people that he's fought aren't, with all due respect to them, they could all walk through this door and kick my ass. But with all due respect to them, they're not these huge guys.
They're not top.
And you look at some of his fights, I know that I was so excited when he was fighting Vitor Belfort, and I was so excited. That was one of the pay-per-views I got.
Yeah.
And honestly, I could have come up here and put in the popcorn in the microwave and come back down because we're done. If you want to see a replay of that fight, you go to circlekick.com. It was absolutely boring. So I will be the first person to say, listen, I think Chael Sonnen's important now, but you know what? He's got a fight coming up with John Jones, and the trash talk is only getting him so far. I honestly think if he loses that fight, is he still going to be the most important person at that point? No, because at that point he's not going to have a leg to stand on. Things are going to start to go downhill for him, and that's it. And you'll probably see him doing more of the commentating and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But God help us if he wins.
You know what? If he wins, I will throw up on the table for your fans.
God help us if he wins.
And you're right. I think that because of this, he's been given all these opportunities, and he's been given the chance to coach, which still blows my mind. But he's got to produce. He's got to produce. Otherwise,
it's
my point is easily validated.
It is definitely put up time for Chael Sonnen, or else he definitely has to shut up.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, all these opportunities I think are being afforded to him mainly because of the fact that he is trash talking as much as he wants. Is it the right way for it to go about? Probably not. But again, controversy sells. And the fact that the two of us are sitting here on a Sunday afternoon talking about Chael Sonnen obviously means we're kind of buying what he's selling.
Well, actually, you asked me to come because you know that I just hate him.
Yeah, well, and you hate him, but that, again, just goes to show that he's evoked an emotion out of you. Most of these fighters probably haven't evoked that much of an emotion out of you, right?
Oh, some of them definitely get an emotion out of me, but
all right, so
that's
moving on.
A different discussion.
So moving on, let's switch gears here a little bit while I still have you. I want to talk to you about super fights.
Yeah.
Now, back in UFC 100, and probably since then, maybe even before then, we've been teased with the idea of super fights, where we take fighters from different weight classes and we put them together and we have a big fight. We've heard for years and years the talk of George St. Pierre fighting Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
We heard the last fight when he fought Condit. Oh, if he beats Condit, he's going to fight Silva, and Silva was in the audience and all that stuff.
That's what Dana said.
So that was the whole teasing. So I wanted to get your opinion on super fights, because the way that I see it, the only super fight that makes sense would be John Jones against Anderson Silva, because Anderson Silva's dabbled in 205.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, as much as I respect George St. Pierre, and honest to God, I think he's the best fighter in the UFC right now. I think he's the classiest, and I think he's the most talented fighter. I do not think a fight with him against Anderson Silva helps anybody in the St. Pierre camp. I think he's going into a fight that he probably cannot win. Yeah. Not saying that Anderson's that much better of a fighter, but just the size difference alone, I think, puts him at an extreme disadvantage.
So, you know what, I kind of have to agree with you. Like, for me, I think the idea of the super fights, that sells more than the actual super fight. Like, I think it's more about, like, hey, could you imagine if we put this guy and this guy? Oh my God, that'd be so amazing! Well, wait, what if we did this guy and this guy? Oh my God, that'd be so amazing! Like, I think that actually sells more than probably the actual fight itself. So when it comes to George St. Pierre, you know, like, my biggest thing about, like, you know, George and the champions, you know, like, sometimes people are like, oh, you know, he doesn't finish fights, and I get that can probably get annoying, you know, but to your point, five rounds of cardio is pretty impressive. But at the same time, too, when you're a champion and you've defended your championship, come and get it. I don't think that they need to be risking themselves. Yeah. You want the championship? Come get it. You know what I mean? So that's my viewpoint there. But for the super fights, like, I really don't think, to be honest with you, that the Anderson fight and GSP would necessarily be exciting. Like, it might, I could totally see the potential for a stalemate. You know what I mean? Because they're both very much, if you guys are, you know, fans, if you are watching UFC, you'll notice that Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre usually spend the first round testing you. How far are you away from me? You know, they're really just testing. It's really not a lot of action packed in that first round. So what they really do is test each other out. And I think that they kind of have that same mentality of, okay, I got to figure you out. What's your weakness? And then by the second, third, fourth, whatever round, you know, they're obviously picking out what those, you know, downfalls are. So I don't know if it would really be that exciting. I think Silva-Jones would probably be a little bit more exciting. Only reason being is they would both be stand-up fighters. Yeah. Whereas in George, being more of the wrestler, you know, I think that if he got Anderson on the ground, I think it would just kind of be, you know, George sitting on him for 5 rounds. And then if he stands up with Anderson, I think really it's not really fair necessarily with the reach advantage. And just, you know, just a different build, you know, like George being so bulky. You've got to kind of think of the height difference too, right? Like, so learning, now that I'm in kickboxing, learning like when punching up, right, is going to be a different physiology setup than you would if you're punching down or punching forward, right? So you got to kind of think of how that would all work. So I really do think that Anderson and Jones would probably be the one I see happening most realistically.
The more logical fight.
But I don't even know if it'll ever happen either.
That was what I was going to ask you. Do you think we'll ever see it? Because I feel that Dana White likes to tease us.
That's it in itself, because it sells.
Yeah, he teases us and he pulls it back. If they do this, if they do that, there's so much jumping through hoops.
I think that they'll have to probably, to maintain credibility, I bet you that eventually there will be a super fight. But at what capacity, I don't know. You know what I mean? Because I think that they'd have to, because you can't just keep dangling a carrot, because after a while people will be like, you ain't going to give me no carrot. You know what I mean? So,
you know, I've said it before. One of my frustrations with the UFC, and I mean, I understand that it's a business and you want to keep the business going, you want to keep people talking about it and keep the momentum going, but I find because we've got the pay-per-view every month, we're getting the UFC on Fox, you know, we're getting a little oversaturated. And I know they've got a big roster and they've got to go through it and they've got to get all these people fights. But I think one of my issues is that we're not seeing a lot of good cards. Like, we're not seeing a lot of, like, there might be 1, maybe 2 good build fights on the card. When you get into the fight themselves, you could see, you know, a fight of 2 guys who...
with the initial setup.
You know, but the initial setup. So do you think that the UFC could then benefit from having like stronger cards? Because I think the last time we saw like a really stacked card was UFC 100. And how many years ago was that?
And you know what? But that's also when the insurance stuff wasn't a factor. So the other problem being is now that there's a lot more support on the insurance side for the fighters. I mean, if they have the littlest injury, well, oh, you know what? I'm injured. I have to fight now. Like, how many times? Like, there's been entire cards completely switched out because people are, you know, oh, I'm hurt. And I'm not saying that these people aren't hurt, but it's just because they changed the rule on that. I mean, like, any card that comes out, I don't trust anything. Like, until the actual day of the fight, I don't know what's actually going to happen.
Because you never know who's going to get injured.
There's actually been some that have just actually completely flipped out. So I think that they need to kind of tighten that up. Like, I'm not saying that they have to fight hurt, but maybe they can kind of filter, like, how come there's such a drastic change? Like, you're right. UFC 100 was boss. That was boss. And I went to UFC 127. That was bossages, too. And, but, I mean, as we're progressing, and these rules are kind of, you know, in favor of the fighters, and I get that, but almost to the point where it's like, as a consumer, you're now risking me spending money because do I want to go buy tickets to Toronto to go see this fight, or is, you know, a week out, or we gonna have a swap out, and then I just blew $2,000 on this killer weekend, and, you know, now I can't do it, so.
Because, you know, when you see that disclaimer, fight subject to change, makes people nervous.
Yep.
A pick. We got, in a couple of weeks, we got our boy St. Pierre going against Diaz. And here's the thing. When this fight was first announced...
I hate Diaz.
And we're going to talk about that. When that fight was first announced, I was like, okay, what is going on here? Why is Dana White protecting St. Pierre? I want to see St. Pierre fight this, was it Johnny Hendricks guy? This guy with the knockout power. And somebody, again, a lot smarter than me in the whole UFC thing, came along and said, no, Keith, you're thinking Diaz isn't going to be a good fight. You're thinking this Diaz is going to be a walk in the park. This is going to be a tough fight for St. Pierre. So, again, for the umpteenth time, he's fighting in Montreal. It's like George St. Pierre cannot fight anywhere but Montreal.
Yeah,
Anderson Silva
because he can fill the Bell Center. That is so much money. The UFC's like, ding, 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 ding. But cha-ching, cha-ching. Take out this, what is it, the dollar signs.
But, when again, I'll agree with that. The same way they put, most of Anderson Silva's fights in Brazil lately. But I guess the question is, when you look at this fight, does Diaz stand a chance? Is this going to be a clear-cut win for St. Pierre? Because I'll tell you something. When I look at the fights that St. Pierre has, he has tough fights. Yeah. Anderson Silva's last fight was against Stephan Bonner. Like, I'm sorry, I respect Anderson Silva.
Well, they're running out of people for Silva. Yeah, that's what's happening.
You know, I respect his ability, but he hasn't defended his title since last July. Yeah. And the people that he defends his title against, with the exception of my guy, Chael Sonnen, it's been pretty boring. So, and then you look at John Jones. John Jones' last title defense was against who? Was it? He had Rashad Evans, who again he towered over. He had what's that guy? The 18 guy there, the guy who just growls and then gets his ass kicked. What's his name?
Hold on.
The guy who dry humps reporters.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about. Rampage Jackson.
Rampage Jackson, that's right.
And then Lyoto Machida, whose claim to fame was knocking out one of the Expendables. Okay,
yeah.
You know? So nice. Again, I'm not very impressed with the fights with Silva or Jones. Again, mad respect to Silva because he's very talented. But again, I find their opponents are more cherry picked. Whereas with St. Pierre, he's fighting tougher opposition.
So I totally agree with you. So do I think that Diaz fights a chance? Well, has a chance. I think any fighter in any fight has that Hail Mary, you know, overhand right, you know, just having to hit you on the button chance. So does he have a chance? Of course he does.
But do you think he'll win?
No. Now, I think that, you know, with George, like, it's funny, when he first had his first fight back after being, like, off for, what, like
a year and a half or something.
Like, close to, almost 2 years, is, you know, that he was going to have ring rust, and I even called it, and he said, after that fight, when he came back after his win, he was like, now I understand what ring rust is, you know what I mean? So, I think that if Diaz was his first fight back, I think he'd have a much better chance. Now that he's kind of shaken the rust off and he's getting back to being old George, I think that one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to just out-wrestle him all 5 rounds, and that's quite plausible. I know that you know, Diaz is a Gracie guy, and you know, mad respect in that you know, regard, but I haven't seen him do anything that impressive, to be honest with you. I think his brother's a little bit more you know, talented on the submission side of things.
His brother's a lightweight, is he?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
He's I don't remember. I'm blanking out on that.
All right, not a big deal.
But so I think that if he stands out with Diaz, that's going to help Diaz a little bit because I think that he's much stronger striker than he is on the ground. But I think that what's going to happen is what probably usually happens is George is going to overwhelm him. He's going to be on top of him. He's going to wear him down, and he's going to just, you know, pardon my language, but bitch bitch slap him, you know, for all 5 rounds, you know, because he's probably going to want to either do a solid to all his fans, because all his fans want to see Diaz get just that smirk smacked off his face.
Okay.
So he's going to either do that for the fans and just beat on him slowly so he does a slow death.
Yeah.
Or, you know...
So I got a question for you, and again, you know, the debate part of this was fun, but this isn't like to debate you, but just a question. We talked about Chael Sonnen like earning the right because his last fight was a loss. Now coach me up on this. Diaz's last fight was a loss to Carlos Condit back in UFC 43.
Can I see what you're looking at?
Yeah. So that was Diaz's last fight. So why is Diaz getting this title shot right now?
So this one's, you know, another WWE basically situation. I think this one's a little bit more of a, you know, I don't really see it as the same situation as Chael Sonnen, but somewhat similar because that fight was already supposed to happen.
Okay.
And then, so basically, George St. Pierre and Diaz were already supposed to fight. Someone got hurt or something didn't happen, or I think he was still with Strikeforce, and like there was that, like Dana White bought Strikeforce, and then the whole pulling him over, there was some weirdness there.
Okay.
So then the fight never happened, and then stuff went down, and then the Condit stepped up, and that's where the fights happened. And then there was the interim, and then George got hurt for 2 years. So people have been waiting for George to beat the snot out of Diaz for like 3 years now. So I think Dana White is just doing a solid to the fans, you know, and appeasing them that way, because I think people wanted to see that fight. Was he earning that fight? Absolutely not. Okay. But I think that, you know, for the fans that wanted to see him beat the snot out of him 3 years ago, we're finally going to get our opportunity to see it happen.
And it's interesting, because it was one of the things we're talking about here. It's consistency, right? Because you have Michael Bisping, who was trying to get to fight Anderson Silva, which he probably would have gotten destroyed. But he fights Vitor Belfort, he loses, and it's like, nope. That's it, you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got, you know, we've talked about 2 guys here, right?
Fitch got fired after a win.
Yeah, we got a couple of guys here who have lost, and now they're getting title shots. So I think we definitely need consistency in our MMA wish list.
Well, that's our wish list, but I mean, like, you know what, you nailed it right at the beginning of this talk, which is, it's a business. So at the end of the day, it's about money. What's going to make me money? And you know what, like that, it does serve the purpose of Chael sometimes.
Chael Sonnen's give him a lot of money right now, would you say?
So are those actual good fighters.
But
yeah.
That Chael Sonnen guy, he's making him some pretty good coin. Listen, I want to thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Did you have fun?
I had super fun.
This is
Are you
going
to let me come back on?
I definitely want you to come back on. Let's find more things that we disagree on, because this is awesome.
We can just talk MMA stuff. Sometimes we can talk about stuff that like is awesome, because UFC is awesome.
UFC is absolutely awesome.
Hey, can we say things like, if you have questions or comments about our discussion today, you can email Keith, and maybe I can come back on and we can answer the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, you can definitely follow me on Twitter at CFL_fan, and you can definitely follow Sarah on Twitter also at